What's up, YouTube? There comes along in PoE's history a build that I feel like is just so powerful, so affordable to get off the ground that it will inevitably be nerfed. And this is probably one of the most highly offending builds I've ever seen in PoE history in terms of power for investment. And it is, of course, Detonate Dead. Now, the nice twist about this Detonate Dead build is Detonate Dead is not known to have great clear speed. It is a build that's known as a 2-button build. You have to desecrate and then you have to blow everything up. However, with the advent and introduction of the Squire, you're able to use a Scepter and you gain shield charge with Fire Burst. And you have a 6-link in a Scepter now with Fire Burst. And this is a complete game changer. Now, this build does require a Squire. And I originally rolled this build in the Gauntlet because I found a Squire in SSF, so I decided to try to figure out a build that would best utilize a Squire, and it turns out that Fire Burst Auto Bomber Elementalist with the Squire and a Scepter is actually extremely strong. You do get kind of carried by Detonate Dead for single target, and the main problem with any Fire Burst build, as people may know, is that the single target is pretty bad, and this is definitely not an issue of DD. I'm sure everyone has seen footage of DD killing Maven with a 1-link. And as long as you're not really fighting Shaper, and even with Shaper with this setup, I was able to do it pretty much super fast. And I'm currently playing a Venom Gyre character. And let's just say this character has more single target and more damage than the Venom Gyre character, along with better clear. And I spent like 100 plus exalts into the Venom Gyre character. Now, this character did carry me to a demi in Elementalist, and I was able to reach like I think 96 in like a day and a half or something. So it is extremely fast at mapping. You pretty much have a playstyle where you're just shield charging around the maps, and then when you get to the boss, you desecrate, and then you pop Vault, Detonate Dead, and everything just dies. And compared to the Poisonous Concoction build that I played to get 100 in both temp leagues, this build is miles faster and it blows it out of the water. However, there is the introduction of having to be using a Squire, although you can use this build with a staff or a bow, and it'll probably function just as well. However, not having shield charge, and as anyone may know, if you do any fast mapping, shield charge is king or whirling blades is king, and without those movement skills, you're literally going to be mapping at nearly half the speed. So that's why the Squire for the Fire Burst is such a huge upgrade. So let's get straight into my character's build, and I'm gonna have to be using PoE Ninja because the league is void and I actually cannot log into my character anymore. So let's check out the PoE Ninja. Now, this is the character. It's called Kobe Black Mamba Squire DD. Now, I'm going to link this PoE Ninja profile. And for anyone wondering, how do you actually import a code into Path of Building from PoE Ninja? This is how you do it. So you grab that paste and then you import it into the code. And the nice part about PoE Ninja is it actually takes and uses the settings that it thinks you should have depending on what your character is using. Obviously, some stuff like Frenzy is not used if you can get Frenzy charges, and there's no onslaught. So it's not exactly perfect, but it gives us the best setting possible. So for this character, you can see here I'm using a Void Scepter, and I was able to spam essences on it with essence of, I think it's Hysteria. It's whatever the yellow essence is. And I did this until I was able to pretty much just get Fire Burst by itself. I did get lucky and I got fire damage. And if I was able to, I would probably multi-mod, get Fire Burst, craft on fire damage multi, and then craft on fire damage, and get fire damage as extra chaos damage as a craft perhaps. Now, this is a Squire build, of course, and Squire is not really necessary. You could technically use a staff or a bow and you use the essence, and then you are able to have a 6-link still. It doesn't need to be 6-link, it just need to be 6-socketed. So technically a bow or a staff is another option for a more budget option if you do not want to use a Squire. Now, Squire is a 200 exalt item, and I know that it's not reachable for a lot of people, but at the end of the league, if you're trying to splurge out on a Squire build that's a little bit different, that doesn't require like an insane upfront cost of the other items, then this is a perfect build for you. Now, If you wanted to be really, really rich, and I don't think there's a scepter that exists currently, you could technically get efficacy and unbound ailments as mods on an Elder Scepter. So what this means is that you're able to theoretically get an 8 linked Fire Burst, which is actually insane damage. I think each link adds around 30 to 40% extra damage. So in reality, if this was not if the league wasn't so close to being over, I would definitely try to craft one. But let's be real, this build is probably getting nuked into the ground in 3.17. However, if you wanted to try to play it, I highly recommend it. So this build was, I did prioritize a lot of defense because I didn't want to die. So this is a max spell suppression build. So this is a life spell suppression, and then it has the unveiled mod of increase the duration of ailments you inflict while focused. So the way you play this build is you put left click on focus, and every like couple seconds, like 8 seconds or so, you will have a period where you'll be doing like double to triple damage because of the duration of the ignite. Now, this chest piece is another life, resist, and spell suppression. So these pieces of gear are nothing special because I'm pretty much just playing in SSF. Now, this ring is a flammability ring, and it's a pretty good ring in SSF. I pretty much crafted this with Suffocaces Cannot Be Changed in a Veiled Chaos mod, and then I crafted on the Elrion. Now, Ungo's Harmony, you might be wondering why I'm using Ungo's Harmony. The reason I use Ungo's Harmony is because in order to proc Elemental Overload, you need a crit. And without Ungo's Harmony, your crit chance is pretty low. So if you take off Ungo's Harmony, you have 7% crit. But with it on, you have 23% crit, which makes it a lot easier. I did anoint Searing Heat. Now, the reason you anoint Searing Heat is because I wanted to get a faster playstyle. And this allows your Ignites to deal damage faster. And I felt that just felt really good to play with. Now, Barracks Respite is used because Barracks Respite is pretty special in that it pro lifts the Ignite and it can chain off screen. So if you watch the video that I was doing at the beginning, you can see sometimes that the Ignite actually chains multiple screens away if it's a pretty dense packed map. Now the reason behind this is because Barracks Respite says when you kill an ignited enemy, inflict an equivalent Ignite on each nearby enemy. Now, this is different from Ignite Proliferation and Fan the Flames. Now, what Ignite Proliferation does is it puts down like this little like red circle around where the Ignite happened, and every single mob that enters the area is ignited. So Ignite Proliferation does not chain the Ignite off screen. So that's why Barracks Respite is a super, super good ring for clear speed. Now, Corpse Walker are a pair of boots I pretty much just use because I got an SSF. Now, the reason you use Corpse Walker is because you don't really want to ever be casting Desecrate except for maybe bosses. So what this means is with Corpse Walker, you'll spawn corpses, and it does take corpses from your Raised Spectre pool. So you can pretty much just walk up to the mob, immediately cast Detonate Dead once, and then you can trigger your auto bombing with Herald of Thunder, and you can be on your merry way, and you pretty much have no upfront time invested into having to cast Desecrate and then DD. And this is a super nice change, and it does make mapping feel a lot smoother. And the whole point of this build is to make Detonate Dead feel a lot smoother in mapping and take it and utilize its single target damage to carry us while utilizing Fire Burst's amazing clear. So it's pretty much like having two abilities that offset each other's weakness. So this belt here is just a heavy belt Elder. It has a lot of resist and a lot of strength. As always with these builds, we're running Grace Determination Aura, so it takes a lot of strength and dex. So stats are always a huge issue with this setup, especially when you're playing a witch and you're at the top side of the tree. So here we have another gloves with resist and spell suppression. Now spell suppression is just broken, and without a shield with spell suppression, you pretty much have to prioritize getting spell suppression on your helm, your chest, and your gloves. So that's why these pieces all pretty much have maxed out spell suppression. And then you get some spell suppression on the tree with instinct over here, and that's pretty much it. So that's why getting spell suppression is so important. And then you also have the spell suppression mastery to give you 10% chance if your boots, helmets, and gloves have evasion. Now, if you really struggle with spell suppression, you could, instead of anointing Searing Heat, you could anoint either Innervate, or you could anoint this one down here, which is Entrench, which is a lot cheaper to do. Now, if you look at the tree, this is pretty much just a standard detonate dead tree. Now, the reason why I took these nodes over here, and people may wonder, is because since we're not a necromancer and we can't trigger with bone offering, and you can't use trigger because our void scepter has fire burst. So the gem sockets in the scepter need to be linked for fire burst. So without spiritual aid and righteous army and any minion regen, I felt that the specters were just chain dying, and every single time your specter dies, you have to go back to either the city and delve, or you have to go to heist in order to resummon them. So that's why I got this minion node. I not know a lot of people get the elemental damage node instead, but without these nodes right here, the specters were pretty much always dying, and it was really annoying having to resummon them. Now, this cluster, the one I'm using, I'm pretty much just using Burning Bright and Corrosive Elements. Now, the reason you get Corrosive Elements is because we want to apply Mastermind of Discord to get exposure. So this is why we have Corrosive Element, and then we have Smoking Remains, which makes a smoke cloud, which is pretty useful. We have Blowback, which helps us deal ignite damage faster. Now, the reason why this cluster jewel looks kind of scuffed is because I was doing this on Trade League. So it was, or not Trade League, on SSF League. So it was a lot harder to get some of the optimized setup. In fact, it was pretty hard to even get a fire cluster. I think I'm using an, oh, I actually did get a passive point cluster. So in terms of masteries, we have reservation mana efficiency, we have life mastery, we have fire damage over time multi, and this is another damage over time multi if you killed recently. And fire exposure applies an additional 5% fire res. And most people take this node over here, but this node is actually not useful for DD unless you are a necromancer. So that's why we opt not to take it. And then here we take exposure, inflicts at least 18%. And this is the spell suppression one. So basically, we're buffing our exposure, getting more dot multi, and getting more reservation efficiency to cast more auras. Now, in terms of the skills of this build that you end up using, where is it? Wait, where did the skill tree go? So in terms of the skills that we end up using, we are using Vol DD, Deadly Ailments, Unbound Ailments, Swift Affliction, Cruelty, Burning Damage for the Vol DD. Now we have Desecrate, Minion Life, Meat Shield, Raise Spectre. Reason I linked Minion Life and Meat Shield is the Raise Spectre kept dying. Now for Cast When Damage Taken setup, you use Cast When Damage Taken and Vol Molten Shell. Make sure that the Vol Molten Shell is around the same level as Cast When Damage Taken, or it won't cast. And we have Flame Dash, and we use Herald of Thunder. Herald of Thunder is the reason why this auto bombing setup works. So every time you create a storm when you kill a shocked enemy, and your enemies will always be shocked because for our ascendancy, we have this thing over here, Shaper of Storms. Your hits always shock. So this creates a chain effect where your Fire Burst procs Herald of Thunder, and then a Herald of Thunder hit procs the Fire Burst hit. So it just creates this chain reaction. And when this reaction is broken, you pretty much just spam DD on single target to cast more Fire Bursts. Now we have Shield Charge, faster attacks, and we're running Grace Determ. So in the end, we're running Grace, Determination, Herald of Thunder. I would run Defiance Banner, but this build is pretty gem starved or socket starved. So maybe you could use Unset Ring. Now, in terms of what you want for a jewel, you want life, fire damage over time multi, damaging ailments deals damage faster is pretty good, attack and cast speed is pretty good, damage over time multiplier. So there's a lot of pretty good things. Now, there is another setup where you could potentially use a Black Flame ring, or I think it's a replica Black Flame, and just make sure fire damage deal chaos damage. And that does open up being able to use Withering Touch, and that might be a lot more damage. But this is personally my setup. I just wanted to go over this build real fast because I do think this is probably one of the best builds that I played in all of the temp events. It's pretty much only enabled by a Squire, but you can play it with a staff if you wanted to. A Scepter with Squire is going to be much, much better in terms of clear speed. And on the top end, it will beat it out because it can become 8 linked. Now, this build will definitely get nerfed 100% in 3.17. The Fire Burst aspect will not get nerfed, but the Detonate Dead will definitely go, right? So we would probably have to find another skill to carry the single target. Now, if you haven't played this build before, I would highly recommend you try it out if you're still into playing PoE and you haven't tried out Detonate Dead. Detonate Dead is a pretty slow skill for clear speed. It's not exactly the fastest if you compare it to like softcore juicer builds. But Fire Burst really brings it into like, yeah, I think even the S tier of clear speed in softcore trade. And that's what I truly believe. And this build was absolutely a blast. So give it a try. Let me know if you've played Fire Burst before and what you think about the single target in the comment down below. What the single target would be like without DD in the future. But thanks for watching, everyone. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. And I hope you find more Mage Bloods, Exalts, and Squires to me. And see you next time. Bye.